nearly 50 years ago. It had such a striking influence on me and my life, and I know on yours because we've had this conversation. But I want you to share, as a young man growing up, what Dr. King meant to you and what he still means to you nearly 50 years after his death.
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that, Paul, because I really do think that as time goes on, it even becomes more important. At that point in time, it's kind of like running a race, and you're so much into the race that you have one sort of thought, and then after you finish the race and you go back and analyze it, you say, oh man, I didn't realize it was at that moment that I really did this or I made that move. I look at it now and I kind of look at all that has happened and all of the sort of at each other's throats that we can be at, and I'm amazed at all that was accomplished, and it was all accomplished in nonviolence. And I think we lose sight of that. And in fact, at the museum yesterday, one of the books in the gift shop was a book that was called War Without Violence. And that just struck me. That's what King was about. It was, I'm going to make change, but we're not going to do it violently. And to get people to understand that that really can get people to change. And I just am totally, all these years have passed, 50 years like you said, and I'm just totally amazed at the fact that how did someone or someone's get to that point and stay in that point and never leave from that point, but even more so to now recognize how important that was to the change that took place. So, you know, you're right. I mean, there were things that were happening at that time in that 66, 67, 68 period of time that sort of changed my life completely and changed sort of thoughts that I had about things and things to do. But when I look back now 50 years later, I'm just marvel at what Dr. King stood for and how he always moved forward on that. It was never about him. It was always about us.
David, it's interesting in reflecting on this day. We had a 15-year-old call a few minutes ago from Missouri who talked about Dr. King and the meaning that he has learned in school. And then we had an elderly man who was in Birmingham in the early 60s and felt and could sense the reverberation of the bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church that many believe was one of the seminal moments of the civil rights movement. I'm curious what you learned yesterday and so many other days that you spend with young people, whether they're athletes or students on your campus, in relation to Dr. King. How does that resonate to young people today?
Well, I think we have to be very, very careful that we don't automatically believe that they know the story and they know how they got to where they are. And so I'm always trying to explain to students, and even my own kids, you know, I always say that the essence of what Dr. King meant was, and this was to my own kids as they were growing up, is who you go to school with. I mean, as simple as that. You know, that friend, that teammate you had, that kid that just spent the night over our house, or you spent the night over his house or her house. Dr. King was the one that made that happen, because when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. And so something as simple as that, and I think it's extremely important that the younger generation understand what they're seeing today wasn't always the case, and to understand how we got there. And I do think that's important. And I think the examples of it, and I think you mentioned one that has always been sort of a real central point to me, the bombing of that church. You know, Paul, as you go through things and in life, you try to learn how to accept things and how to say there's a purpose for things. And I think, like all the rest of us, I've been pretty good at that. That's the one I've never been able to get past. And every time I go to Birmingham, for SEC meetings or whatever, I have to go by, at least drive by the church. And it took me for the longest to understand, well, how do I put this in any place? And where it finally came to me once as I was sitting in the car, just sitting there looking at it, is, so this is what hate can really do. So, and it told me I never, ever, no matter what the circumstances, will let myself get to that point. Because this is what hate can really do. And it's something that I can't explain. I can't rationalize it. I can't put it in any sort of thing other than, so this is what hate can really do. And I think we have to teach people that. You know, you can be mad at somebody, you can dislike some outcome,